Hello, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's first video on Star Trek the Animated Series. This, of course, is a patron-only video, so thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. It's very much appreciated. So now, very interested to dive into Star Trek the Animated Series. So, for the longest time, the animated series was not considered canon, and I was just told like a couple years ago that now it is canon, and the reason why it is because CBS wants to make money off of it, so now they're calling it canon, and that's basically it. But I think when most people look at the pantheon of Star Trek shows, the animated series, it doesn't really, it's more of a side note. It's not like the main shows of the original series: Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, now Discovery. And the animated series always feels like something it feels more like the novels. Like it's a nice little series of to get more adventures with these characters you love than only just the 79 episodes that we got in the 6 movies, and however many cameos they appear in other material. But so it's like the novels in that regard. You get more adventures with this, but it doesn't really feel like its own real Star Trek show. And I remember I actually watched this a little bit when I was a kid, or I should say I watched parts of it because I thought it was incredibly boring, mainly when other people were watching it, like my brother or his friends, and I was just like, why are you watching this? This is boring. And as an adult, I still think it's boring. If I'm being honest. It's weird because that it's called the animated series, because the characters are less animated, if you know what I mean. They're really stiff, and it's very like dialogue driven, and they're mainly, there's a lot more technobabble spouting than there was in the actual original series. The original series, the characters were a lot more personable, a lot more interactive, where here it's just like characters just standing still going, oh no. And I think that's because they maybe had a small budget and they couldn't animate it that well, but I think a lot of animated shows in the 70s were actually kind of similar to this. And maybe it was a certain style that I just never got into. But here's the thing about the animated series is that I don't think it's terrible. I think most of these episodes are all gonna be like mid-range, pretty much. I'm probably gonna give like a 4 or 5 or 6 to most of these episodes. There's one exception in this batch, which I'm about to get to, but I get that impression that because most of them are fine, they're just, and I've only seen the animated series, like I watched it all the way through maybe 10 years ago for the first time, and I was like, that's fine. I kind of forgot about it, and I watched it all the way through again maybe like 5 years ago, and I kind of forgot about it. It's very forgettable. Like, it's different than all the other Star Trek series where I remember each episode, even like shows with tons of episodes like Next Gen, Voyager, even Voyager, like I remember pretty much every single episode. I mean, there's a couple episodes that are so forgettable I have to be reminded, but most episodes I remember them by name, I remember what happens. And animated series, like even now, I have no idea what the episode titles correspond to, which episode's coming out next. It just never grabbed me in that way. So it'll be interesting getting into it. So anyway, as I said, I'm going to cover 2 episodes each month. So in this video, I'll cover the first 2 episodes of Season 1. So let me just go ahead and get into that, starting with Beyond the Furthest Star. Now, since I think you're probably like me, you don't know what happens just by the episode title, I'll give a brief synopsis as well. So this is an episode where the Enterprise discovers a weird alien ship that's ancient. I think they said it's like 3 million years old, which is a bit ridiculous. Or maybe they said 3,000, which would be more plausible. But knowing Star Trek, they probably said 3 million. But anyway, it's a very unique ship, alien ship. They've never seen it designed before. It's massive. Of course, it's abandoned. And then you get the impression that the aliens that used to own the ship abandoned it and tried to destroy it. And when they go on board, like there's this It's really cool. Like this, I like the design of the anime because the animated series is able to do more fantastical settings and fantastical characters because they don't have to worry about, they can just draw it, so they don't have to worry about budget, about actually having these elaborate sets. They can just draw it. So I think that is an advantage to the animated series, and that's why they have, like, I think Walter Koenig didn't want to come back to do the animated series, so they made up another character, Arex, which is just this alien who we see in this episode. There's another one, this Catwoman, but she's not in the first 2 episodes, so I'll get to her later. Not Catwoman, but alien cat. They actually designed her for, they had her as a background character in Star Trek 4 and 5. But anyway, not the character who appeared in the original series, her species, but getting off topic. Anyway, so they're on this alien ship, and there's like a thing that's pounding on this giant, massive space store trying to get out, and they're like, what the hell is that? And Spock's like, oh, I think I found this log. So they read the log by this cool-looking alien, and again, there's like much cooler design they could do on the original series, and he manages to translate it. Basically says that there's a danger, don't let this thing off the ship, it's very dangerous, and just when that happens, the thing breaks through the door and like the whole ship starts to explode, so they beam the team out before it happens. And it turns out that the danger is like this energy being who can take over ships like its body, and it wants to basically take over the galaxy. He wants to take over every ship and basically kill the people inside because he can. And this is interesting because Spock compares, like, he thinks of the people inside spaceships the way we would think of white red blood cells inside their body. Like, we don't really have any regard for them as sentient beings, and so they basically kill them off, and so it wants to just spread and take over the whole galaxy. So it is like dangerous. It wants to kill everything. So it takes over the Enterprise, and they introduced this feature that was never seen on Star Trek before. Apparently, the bridge has like a self-defense system. There's like this giant ball that comes down from the ceiling that shoots phasers out of it, and Kirk said activate it when that thing took the ship, but the thing takes over the ship, so it takes control of that and it starts shooting everyone, telling them to do. And I love how, because they don't really have guest actors, they just have all the main cast do all the guest voice, and Scotty does most of the male voices. He does like this funny voice, and he was doing the funny voice of the alien. He's like, obey me, like James Doohan. Like, I love the guy, but he really sounds really silly when he does all these silly voices, and this will come up a lot more throughout the series. It's funny, but anyway, so they shoot Spock with the phaser and threaten to kill him until Kirk obeys them, and because Kirk put this force field that the energy being can't penetrate around the navigational system, and he wants to navigate away so he can start spreading across the galaxy, and so he forces Kirk to do it, but Kirk, of course, tricks him and manages somehow to get control of the navigational system. He goes to crash into the planet, and so the alien freaks out thinking he's going to die, so he leaves the ship and goes to the planet, and so the Kirk at the last minute warps away and saves the ship, but leaving the energy being behind, stuck on the planet. And this is what I think was the funniest part of the whole episode, where the ship is leaving and the energy being is going, don't leave me, I'm lonely, so lonely. But it is a kid's show, so you gotta give it some levity, some leeway for that. But I always thought the original series, kind of was more of a kid's show. It worked more like a kid's show, particularly watching it in retrospect in recent years. So I think it makes sense. It translates really well to a kid's show like that. Now, this episode is fine. I didn't really have an issue with it per se, but if you look at it, I feel it's like almost unfair to compare it to actual live action shows because it's an animated show meant for kids. But if you look at the plot structure, 50% of the episode was set up. They spend way too much time because it's only a half hour with commercials, so less than a half hour. It's not a full hour episode like the original series. And so they spent so much time like exploring the alien ship and Spock saying, I wonder what this is, blah, blah, blah. And so the being doesn't even take control of the Enterprise till like halfway through the episode. And so it seems like it's resolved very quickly. It's like they present this danger, this could wipe out all life in the galaxy, and then 2 seconds later they solve it. So you never really had time to get that invested in it, or invested in the story at all, really. You could say this is a drawback to the animated format that's only a half hour long, but I think there's a way it could have been done better. I think they just they got way too bogged down, fascinated with this alien ship, spent way too much time with it, that took up the bulk of the episode. But as I said, this episode's fine, like I'm going to say with most episodes. I don't really have much to say about it. I mean, it's kind of funny, the animated format, and James doing his funny voices. So I give this episode a 6 out of 10. Yeah, 6 out of 10 for the Furthest Star. So then I'll move over to the next episode which is Yesteryear. Now this episode is generally looked upon as the best episode of the animated series, the highest rated episode on IMDb, and I heard most people will say it's the only really good episode out of the animated series. Back when this wasn't considered canon, a lot of people said that this one episode, Yesteryear, is the exception. It is considered canon because it does set up it sets up certain, like, the Vulcan Forge and how, like, Spock has to walk to earn his name. Like, that's something Enterprise referenced when they did their Vulcan trilogy in the 4th season. But the main thing is the Solar, because I believe that's how you pronounce it. In Journey to Babel in the original series, Amanda told Dr. McCoy that Spock had a teddy bear when he was a kid, and McCoy's like, a teddy bear, and like giving him shit about it, and Spock's like, our teddy bears are 6 feet long and have fangs. I'm like, well, then that's not really a teddy bear, is it? If it's alive, then I don't know why Amanda would make that comparison. She should have said he had like an actual bear as a pet. That has like total different connotations. But in Enterprise, I think they were saying that the creature that attacked T'Pol and Archer was a Solar, or was the same kind of thing, and that was a fucking tiger. It was like this vicious, worse than a tiger with like huge fangs. And I'm like, that's no way in hell would anyone call that a teddy bear. You might as well like go to a zoo and see a lion. And someone had a lion as a pet and be like, oh, he has a teddy bear as a pet. It makes no sense. But in this episode, they show the Solar, and it actually does look like a teddy bear. It has these huge fangs, but it's really docile and friendly, and it's like a giant pet teddy bear. I mean, I still think because it's alive, the teddy bear isn't the real best comparison to make, but it does fit a hell of a lot better in the way it was described in Journey to Babel, in my opinion. Anyway, this episode, again, if you haven't seen it, Kirk and Spock are studying the Guardian of Forever. Well, they're studying history using the Guardian of Forever. And while they're in the past, they come back and nobody knows who the hell Spock is. And Kirk has a different first officer who is an Andorian, and so they realize that the timeline must have been fucked up when they were in the past, and they realized that when Spock was a boy, he was killed in the thing, but he was only saved by himself, and for some reason, since he time traveled back, he wasn't there to do it. So Spock needs to travel back and to when he was to Vulcan when he was a little boy in order to save his life when he was a child. So he travels back and he meets Sarek, and he calls himself a distant cousin. And so little boy Spock goes out in the desert to prove himself when he's not supposed to, and he gets attacked by. And now this looks like the thing that attacked Archer and T'Pol. Maybe this was not the Solar. Maybe I can't remember what the hell they called this thing, but this was a tiger-looking thing. It looked a bit goofy in the animated series. So they get attacked by that, and Spock comes and saves his younger self because apparently, I guess, this is kind of Discovery kind of ripped this off. The more I think about this, but anyway. Yeah, it kind of did, because this kind of the same thing happened to freaking Michael Burnham, where she ran off as a kid when she wasn't supposed to and got attacked by this weird Vulcan animal, and her mother time traveled from the future to save her. I'm just thinking about that. But anyway, that's interesting. But anyway, yeah, so apparently the Solar, or the pet, tried to attack off the tiger thing and got hurt, and they managed to kill or scare off the tiger thingy, but the Solar was dying, so young Spock had to go in the desert to get a healer, and the healer was voiced by James Dornan doing one of his funny voices. But he comes back and they heal the Solar, but they said that the Solar was left for too long and he's not going to survive, and so young Spock says goodbye. It's like a little bit heartfelt. I was a bit sad losing the pet, and older Spock saying that actually didn't happen originally, so when he changed the timeline, it kind of fucked it up a bit. So the Solar actually died, but he seemed okay with that, and that didn't seem to have any consequences, so I don't really know what's the point. So he goes back to the present and everything's fine again. Now, I did like that episode, but I don't think it's great. I wouldn't say it's one of the best of I wouldn't compare it to some of the best even of the original series, because the time travel logic is really wonky. Like, I don't even understand what they were going for. Like, how could... If Spock... It seems like they're really fucking with the different modes of time travel. Like, I talk about this a lot on my channel. I sort of borrowed this from the Lore Runner channel. But how to have Type 1, Type 2, Type 3 time travel. Like, all different types of time travel. And this episode is... So it's fine when an episode, even if they misuse it a bit, as long as they stick to one type. But when they mix it up and get these types confused, that's what's happening here, because the idea that young Spock was saved by his older self is Type 1 time travel, where it is always meant to happen. But then the thing with time getting altered and nobody knowing who Spock was, that's Type 2 time travel. And where you can go back and change things, you have to go back and correct the past. So I don't understand, because it's kind of a chicken and egg thing too. Like, the time altering is what calls older Spock to need to go back into the past. But if he always went back to the past, then how come time was that way in the first place? It should have always been. Yeah, it makes zero sense. It's really frustrating the more you think about it. So that kind of annoyed me about this episode. But I just love seeing the Guardian of Forever again. I love the idea, and they carried this on in novels, which is why, again, the animated series is like similar to like novels to me, where you see the appearances again of stuff mentioned in the original series, like the Guardian of Fire, and it makes sense that they would have historians and scientists studying it, although I think it's a bit careless to just be using it to go back in time to study history. I think they would actually be studying the Guardian itself, not using it that way. Oh, and by the way, James Doohan also did the voice of the Guardian. I am the Guardian of Forever. Oh, it's funny. But anyway, but I like the character stuff with Spock. I like his interactions, like pretending to be the cousin with Sarek, and how he said, like, when Sarek's like, "You saved my son's life, how can I ever repay you?" And he's like, "You can repay me by treating your son well." And he's like, "That is an odd request, but I will honor it." Like, stuff like that was really nice. Like, and this showed like young Spock being picked on by other Vulcan children, which is something that they referenced later in other material as well. I think they mentioned it in the original series, but it's interesting to see that. So yeah, and it was like as I said, it was a bit heartfelt, him having to lose his pet and deal with that, and sort of Spock was pushing young Spock to become more Vulcan. So I think it's implied that this is the moment in Spock's life where he decided to devote his life to logic and become a Vulcan rather than a human. That's the impression I get as well. So it's interesting, but time travel doesn't make any sense in this episode. Anyway, my rating for Yesteryear out of 10 is an 8. Extremely good. So, those are the first 2 episodes of Star Trek the Animated Series. I'll be back every month with 2 more episodes to review. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. I very much appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time.